Good evening, everybody. Personally, I was pleased, delighted, in fact, to see that the Green Bay Packers won their game last night. That was a great win for the Green Bay Packers. I've been a fan of the Packers since, as I've mentioned before, since the days of Brett Favre, when here in the UK they first started doing live coverage of American football. As a lot of you will know, I am not a fan of their head of technology, a certain Mr. Mike Halbach. So I sent the video that I did about him to the Green Bay Packers. The fans were invited to send messages of support to the team. I sent my message of support to the team, but also the fact that I addressed it for the attention of Mike Halbach. So hopefully he has watched my video. I don't suppose that the reply actually came from Mike Halbach himself. I presume it was just an automated response to thank me for my support of the team. As I say, it was good to see that they got through to, they beat the Seahawks and Seattle Seahawks, and now I believe they face the San Francisco 49ers. But as I say, I'm not a huge fan of their head of technology, Mr. Mike Halbach. Why am I not so enamoured with him? As a lot of you will already know, I don't believe him. I think that he basically has been involved in perverting the course of justice. And it's not the body language of him and Ryan when they look at each other during their interview, making sure that they are buddying up their story and sticking to the same hymn. You see, looking at purely the body language side of things should be a retrospective thing, one that once the truth and justice for Teresa and Stephen and Brendan has been achieved, then we can look back and point to the body language and say, you know, that was him being dishonest. This was what gave him away. But as I say, but body language really doesn't prove anything until we know the truth. As you know, it would be hypocritical of me to accuse Mike Halbach via body language when a lot of other people have accused, for example, Mike Peterson of his body language being odd. So no, I don't think we can, as I say, retrospectively we can look at what people have done and said and the way they've behaved, and try and read their body language. But no, that's not the big issue. That isn't the big issue for me. For me, it's always been the fact that it's what Mike Halbach said in interviews. When Teresa Halbach is still just a missing person, that the grieving process could last days. Now, I'm a peripatetic music teacher. I know one or two things about the principles of teaching. I know that one of the principles when it comes to teaching is to realise the importance of word association and the fact that often as teachers we are required to inculcate our what we're trying to teach. We need to do that for the benefit of certain people. In the case of Stephen Avery and Brendan Nassy and Teresa Halbach, we need to inculcate the message for the benefit of those people who are blinded both by their hatred of Steve and Brendan and their love and blind faith in law enforcement. Again, as I've mentioned many times before, one only has to look at the case of the Soham murders. Retrospectively, there's been some great articles that have looked at the body language of Ian Huntley and said, you can see where he's lying when his shoulders go and he puts a bit of a grin on his face. That's fine, you can do that retrospectively. But that wasn't what brought Ian Huntley to justice. It was the fact of what Maxine Carr said when she described one of the girls as she was a nice girl. She was a pleasant girl. She was, past tense. The press immediately noticed and alerted the police. As I say, one of the things you have to do in this case is to keep on about certain things that maybe the other side don't like us going on about. I don't care. You need to listen to this carefully. You need to look and see and hear what Mike Holbach was saying when Teresa was merely a missing person. I mean, to use the word grieving process. First of all, as I said, if it was one of the youngsters in the Avery Dassey family that had gone missing, and either one of the Averys or the Dasseys had used the word grieving process when they were still only a missing person, you can bet your bottom dollar that the press would have been all over that. The police would immediately have used that as a means to interrogate that whoever said that. There is no doubt about that. There is no doubt that the press gave Mike Holbach a lot of leeway, and also the police were certainly not interested in asking him about it. Why not? One suspects because it was the police that told Mike Holbach in the first place. Now, of course, some people would say that, when he's using the word grieving process, he's just fearing the worst. However, the very first person to testify in Stephen Avery's trial, immediately after Ken Kratz made his opening statement, was Mike Holbach. And under cross-examination by Dean Strang, he said that his words were that they were a strong family and they were optimistic. The fact that, as I say, people have said it could be that he was simply grieving. Well, no. He said that the family is strong and optimistic. Okay. Can we take everything that Mike Holbach says as being truthful? Fair enough. But the fact that he said that the grieving process could last days, this is a huge problem, because obviously it's bizarre, and for some people it simply fuels the speculation that the cremains that were found in Stephen Avery's burn pit are not those of Teresa Holbach, and they're most likely Carmen Boutwell's. How else can you interpret a comment of the grieving process could last days? As I say, I don't think that Dean and Jerry saw that interview about the grieving process. I don't believe they've ever even mentioned it. I think there's things that will come out in the future which at the moment are being sat upon. I think there's people with information out there that are waiting and have been told, we need to wait till the moment's right to bring forward what you want to say. Will have to wait until we get a process going. And in fact, that was precisely what Jerry Buting said to me in Amsterdam last year. He explained, just as he was about to leave, I'd had a long conversation with him, and I'd invited him to come and speak to us in the Truther community. And he said that, unfortunately, that would be difficult, problematic. He has to be careful about what he says until there has been an evidentiary hearing, at which, of course, Dean and Jerry will undoubtedly be witnesses in the case of ineffective assistance of counsel. As I say, I'm sure that there are certain things that, whilst they would love to be able to shout out from the rooftops and tell everybody about, I'm sure that there are things that at the moment they just have to wait until that time in the process when everything is correct to do so. I see this process quite simply as being, we have to first of all prove to everybody that all of the evidence against Steve and Brendan, well, obviously Steve, but by implication Brendan, is completely bogus. Kathleen Zellner has already done that, but as far as in the eyes of the law, she hasn't yet had a chance to, because certain members of the law community are desperate to avoid her having that chance to do so. Their days of resistance will hopefully be numbered. As I say, once that becomes the case, I think we could find quite a lot of people coming forward with the information that we've either known or suspected, and then it will come out in the form of sworn testimony, affidavits, that this is actually what happened. So I will keep looking to see if anybody else has looked at and listened to what Mike Holbach has said. As I say, it just beggars belief that nobody has come forward and looked at what he said. I can only assume that at the moment it's because he's a member of the Holbach family and he's entitled to his, for want of a better word, privacy in this matter. But for me, he was just a liar and attempting to pervert the course of justice. You really have to wonder what sort of conversations went on between Ken Kratz and the Holbach family. If Mike Holbach, as we know, suggested at Brendan's sentencing that he should have taken the plea deal. It just beggars belief, doesn't it? I mean, if Mike Holbach seriously thought that Brendan Dassey was involved in the murder of his sister, why on earth would he have wanted Brendan Dassey to get off with a lighter sentence by taking a plea deal? Clearly, the whole purpose of getting a coerced confession out to Brendan was so that they could eventually strike him a plea deal. There's only one problem. Bless him, Brendan was incapable of telling a lie. The only time he's ever told the truth is when he's told the story, the fact that he got off the bus, went home, ate something, PlayStation, phone call, bonfire, home. No huge bonfire with body parts in the middle of it. That was all fed to him. Anyway, as I say, I kind of feel it's like my duty as a music teacher, somebody that's got one or two bits of knowledge about the, shall we say, the principles of teaching. We have to keep explaining to those who are doubtful of Stephen and Brendan's innocence. We have to keep explaining to them until eventually it sinks in. Anyway, we'll catch you again soon. Bye for now.